Thanks to its array of controls, the Mod Delay plugin is capable of creating several effects, from basic flanging and chorusing to tremolo and even metallic timbres. It has all the usual parameters for a modulated delay line, plus a few interesting additions that make it an especially flexible tool. The plugin is divided into 4 distinct sections: the main delay parameters, the dual LFO settings, a filter section, and output controls. The first thing you'll notice here that distinguishes this plugin from the previous effects is that now you have a dedicated delay time knob. In chorus and flanger, the delay times are preset to ensure the appropriate effect, but here you can dial up anything from a very short delay, suitable for flanging, to a longer one, appropriate for chorusing. Still in keeping with the more musical, less technical vibe of these plugins, the delay time isn't calibrated in milliseconds, like on most techie delay effects. Instead, it's labeled in percentages, from flanging, short delays, to chorusing, longer delays. More tech-savvy users will know that this probably corresponds to times from about a millisecond or so up to maybe 20 milliseconds, give or take. But the idea is that you dial up the effect you want by ear, rather than by the numbers. Of course, there's also a modulation intensity control to set the depth of the LFO's effect on the delay time. And there's a feedback knob. This will be needed if you want to use mod delay to generate flanging effects, but it has a wide enough range that you could also use it for special effects, metallic timbres and such. If you dial down the mod intensity and crank the feedback, you can achieve some nice, edgy, clangorous tones. The delay time will tune the effect. Keep in mind, all the controls can be assigned to external MIDI controls and automated. The LFO section is the same as we saw in Phaser. Dual LFOs whose modulation can be mixed together to any degree desired, or you can just use one. On stereo out instances, as you can see, there are separate left and right LFO settings for each LFO, plus 2 additional controls. The link button links the left and right LFO knobs for each LFO. And when it's engaged, you can dial up a phase offset between the channels, just like with Ensemble and Phaser. Again, this functions as a kind of width control for the mod effect. The filter section might seem to be standard low and high cut filters, but according to Logic's documentation, it's actually an all-pass filter, like you find in a Phaser, and the low and high cut frequencies are really adjusting the 90-degree point for the stereo all-pass filtering. So the tonal effect is more subtle than regular filters would produce, adding a gentle but distinct resonance to the signal. Over to the right, there's the usual output mix slider that sets the balance between the dry and affected signals. Above that, there's a volume mod slider. This applies the LFO modulation to the signal's amplitude instead of delay time, allowing for a subtle tremolo effect. You could dial down the delay mod, the mod intensity knob, all the way, and crank up the volume mod slider for just tremolo. LFO rates around 6 to 8 Hz will provide a classic gentle tremolo effect. Or you could blend it in with the flanging or chorusing you get from the mod intensity knob. Finally, there are 3 more buttons over in the delay section. In stereo out instances, D mode is the same feature we saw in chorus. It introduces the same emulation of the classic analog Roland chorus, the dimension D, with its extra depth. The remaining two controls are a couple of subtle but useful convenience features. As I mentioned in an earlier video, a side effect of delay modulation is that at stronger settings, a bit of pitchiness can creep into the signal. The de-warble button is intended to minimize that side effect when it becomes a bit too strong, without having to back off too much on the mod intensity. It's usually pretty subtle, and it's dependent on the specific settings of the other controls, but it can come in handy, especially when the mod effect is making a track sound just a little bit out against the rest of the parts in a mix. Constant mod is even more useful. Remember, I mentioned that when the LFO rate is increased, the mod depth, or mod intensity, usually needs to be dialed down, again, to avoid too much sour pitchiness. Well, when constant mod is switched on, that's exactly what it does automatically. If you set up a nice chorus effect with a slow LFO sweep, and then decide you might prefer a faster, more shimmering effect, you can crank the LFO rate, and the mod intensity will automatically be reduced, maintaining the same depth you dialed up with the slower rate. Now, the mod intensity knob itself doesn't move, but that's what's happening behind the scenes. It makes tweaking a chorus effect by ear much simpler and way more convenient. Next up, a look at a model device that combines multiple types of modulation. Rotor Cabinet, Logic's emulation of the classic Leslie speaker.